Welcome back to the Williams Real Estate Channel. I'm your host, Geordie Williams, and today we are discussing the blue chip bandits. Here they are. Now, obviously, you can't name names, but I guess this is a fitting image of the type of chonky dealers in the industry. Unfortunately, the real estate industry has many of them. And today we are discussing the blue chip bandits who suggest to go out and buy something like this. Suppose the blue chip. So this is Hamilton. And those who don't know Hamilton in New South Wales, it is in Newcastle, a regional town. Newcastle, New South Wales, about, say, 2 hours north of Sydney, or 2.5 hours north of Sydney, hour or so north of the Central Coast in New South Wales. Equivalent markets to Newcastle regional town would be the likes of Tamworth or Wagga, Albury-Wodonga, and say Victoria would be the likes of, Bendigo, or a large regional town in Queensland. Equivalent would be the likes of, say, Toowoomba, or even Townsville. Are the equivalent size, equivalent demographic of type of market. However, the old blue chip bandits like to dress it up to be supposed blue chip, where markets supposedly just continue to keep outperforming year on year over the long term. So they say. However, I'm a realist. I look at property through a construction, building, and property development lens. That's my background. And I always say it doesn't matter what you buy, as long as you are buying it for less than the intrinsic value. The price that you need to pay needs to be at least half the intrinsic value. And then it's only a matter of time where people will see value, people will start buying due to the higher yields, it attracts investment. And then once the market goes through a land boom or a market cycle, a boom, the price you pay then exceeds the intrinsic value. So the intrinsic value is the cost to build. These days, minimum 600 grand for a unit. That's a lower end, top end, $1 million. And for houses, something like this, you could build it for, 500 square meter block. You can pick them up for, 300 grand mark, build a house for village style. So the intrinsic value of a house similar to this would be around that 700,000-800,000 by the time you buy the land and little house. However, the wet bandits, or the blue chip bandits, would buy something like this, and it goes. This one was sold. This one was just a one I picked up just online. Typical style I see these blue chip bandits spruiking for 1.2 million bucks. It sold for. So they then dress up. Okay, this is a market that's going to continue to keep going on and on. But the first mistake they make is they're only looking at 15 years worth of sales data. You got to look more than that. You got to dig deeper. And to be fair, yes, Hamilton and Newcastle area has performed like most regions, New South Wales regions, or all the regions in the last 5, 6, 7 years, because we are in the second half of the 18-year land cycle. So the market really only started to perform around that 2013, 2014 over the last, say, 10 years. But markets do not continue to keep going on 200, 300, 400, 500% growth year on year. Boom. They go through booms where they go up 180, 200%. over a 5, 6, 7 year period. They then top out and then go through protracted 10 years on average, sometimes 8, 9, sometimes 13, 14, like what we saw over in Perth many years ago, between 2013 to 2021. But on average, 10 years of stagnant growth. So Hamilton is not going to continue to keep outperforming like it has done historically over the last 5 to 10 years. As you can see, it topped out in 2021. It then retracted. It's now coming up again. Odds on favorite is it's going to go up and down within this $1 million, $1.1 to $1 million band for the next 10 years. So topped out in 21. We're in 2024. And if you look back at history, equivalent point of the cycle was 2005. And from 2005 all the way pretty much to 2012, it pretty much flatlined. So the blue chip bandits are, before they even get started and say, look, this is a market that's going to keep outperforming over the long run, not every market continues to keep performing. You want to pick the markets before they go through the significant bull run, rather than buying an asset like this for 1.2 million bucks. That's 400 or 500 grand over the intrinsic value being the replacement cost. And then you're going to be holding it for many years at this same price point. And you may be thinking, oh, well, it's on a 500 square meter block and they say we can build a granny flat. Up. Once you buy a house for say 400 grand, 500 grand max, and then the property doubles to $1 million or 700, 800, rather than going and buying another house like this, you can then build the second granny flat for 250, 300 grand mark and get in at a wholesale rate, like what I'm doing a lot now up in Queensland, but not overpay right from the start at the peak of a cycle before it's about to go through 10 years of flat, hoping it's going to continue to keep outperforming, because it won't. And then once you build the granny flat, then you're only going to be overcapitalizing to something like this. So they say pick up something, the blue chip bandits, pick up a daggy old place that needs a renovation. This one you could easily blink and spend 150, 200 grand by the time if you want to really get up to the blue chip bandit style, and then build a granny flat to supposedly make a cash flow out of it. So then they say you supposedly get a property that's going to continue to outperform growth and have the benefit of cash flow. I can tell you it doesn't work. I can see through these spruikers. A lot of spruikers tend to pop up now. Also, as we enter the later stage of the land boom, also known as the winner's curse, seeing it now in Bitcoin, new and off the plan. Everyone becomes an investor guru in the later half of the boom and into the winner's curse, similar to what happened in 2005, 6, and 7. Everyone became a genius until the market turned. And then, as Warren Buffett says, it's only until the tide goes out do we discover who is being swimming naked. So I feel for the people that get sucked into buying these types of properties, and the people that, let's just run through the numbers before we talk about who get caught up in or robbed by the blue chip bandits. Because say you bought this for, 1.2 million bucks. $1.2 million. Then you got to supposedly pump in a renovation to boost the rent, 150 grand. Then they say build a granny flat before it even stacks up to build, which is just madness. Minimum, well, we'll say 250 minimum, but you could easily spend up to 300, even 350 on a decent granny flat. Sure, you can throw a construction donger in the backyard and call it a day, but that's not the best product. Say 250, 1.6 million bucks. You're into it for, right? Now you may be thinking, okay, what's that going to then rent out for? Well, let's just have a look. So 680 for the house. We'll give them the blue chip bandits the benefit of the doubt. We'll give them up to the 750. So 1.6 million outlay. So you need, say, at least times 0.2. Yeah, 320 grand deposit. It's a lot of dough. So 750 for the front house, plus say granny flat. I mean, probably 450 realistically. They may try and stooge you and say you can get more, but reality is conservative numbers. Once that property is renovated and it's got a granny flat, you could hypothetically rent it out for $1,200 a week times 52 weeks in a year, 62,000 divided by 1.6 million. Drum roll. Who's ready for it? A whopping 3.9% yield, which is terrible. I mean, we don't touch anything less than 5, and typically we pick up properties with a yield of 6, minimum 6 to 6%, 7%, and even 8%. But minimum 5, and we would only buy something with a 5% yield if the previous owner has been lazy, not pushing the rents, and it's got a tenant that's been living pretty in a grubby state, and the unit or the house has not been renovated. There's a lot of overdue maintenance and it needs a renovation. So then once you turn over the tenant, do a minor cosmetic renovation. We don't like to spend more than 20 grand, 30 grand on a reno. Otherwise you're overcapitalizing. You could use that deposit, use that money as that capital for a deposit for another deal. But once we freshen them up, then they're easy pushing 7, 8, 9, 10, 7, 8, 9% yields, 10% yields for blocks of units, but for multi family, so duplexes, we get around that 7, 8% yields, blocks of units, 8, 9% yields. But a house or a unit, minimum, 6% yields and 7s and 8s once you turn over a tenant and give it a bit of a freshen up. But I mean, we would never say go and spend 1.6 million bucks on a regional house with a granny flat to not even get a 4% yield. It's terrible. In a market that is not going to continue to keep outperforming because it's topped out in 21, it started its protracted stagnant period. And it's going to last probably up in, like most of the regions now, New South Wales, have started their 10 years of flat growth. They're probably 2 to 3 years in. So we like buying in markets after 8, 9 years of stagnant growth because it's any moment, any time now where it'll hook into its next growth cycle, not at a peak of the market. And we definitely don't buy at a peak of the market and then don't suggest building straight away. We only build 5, 6, 7, 10 years down the line once the whole market's doubled or 150, 200%, where it doesn't make sense to buy in that market anymore, but to manufacture another property by building, like a build to rent model. You see developers would buy land, buy sites, they hold them for typically 10, 15 years before they then develop it because they're waiting for the market cycle for it to stack up, for it to make sense to build, to then either sell and rent. You don't typically do it straight away, like what the blue chip bandits say to do. The good old blue chip bandits. They've robbed a few. I've actually been helping a few people now that have been stung by the blue chip bandits. And unfortunately, they learnt the hard way. And I mean, they are targeting the high income earners, people who are on a solid $300,000-400,000 wage, or have a business that's pumping out heaps of cash that can support buying these types of assets. But even if you did have a solid income or a business that you just want to park your money in an asset that's going to continue to keep growing, you wouldn't overcapitalize into something like this, buying a house. Because, I mean, I'll put a link in the comments below of what I would buy for this money. Would be 2, if not 3 blocks of units. I recently bought a block of units, 4 one-bedroom units on one site, already strata titled for $665,000. And these days, I've got the 4 units renting out for $300 a week. Bought it only 4 or 5 months ago. Times 4 times, so for the same amount of money that you could generate out of this in earnings times 52. 62,000 a year divided by the purchase price, 665. times 100, 9%, pushing 9%. And all I needed to do was redo the leases and patch a few missing fence palings and paint the gutters and fascias. Spent about 2 or 3 grand just touching the joint up. Didn't really need much and issued all new leases to the tenants, pushing 9%. That's what I would buy. I'd buy multiple blocks of units. If you have got a lot of income to spend and you want to park your cash out of your business, do not get conned by the blue chip bandits, because you end up buying something like this, pumping a heap of capital into a regional town. Don't get mistaken. Newcastle is a regional town, just like buying in Tamworth or Albury-Wodonga, Toowoomba. It is not a supposed blue chip. And regardless of blue chip or whatever blue chip is, I wouldn't buy blue chip because blue chip doesn't, cash flow doesn't stack up. And every market goes through periods of booms and every market goes through periods of stagnant growth. So the people that end up getting conned into buying this stuff will be hanging for many years based off the 18-year land cycle and historical sales data, which we use, which I only see us really being the only ones in the whole industry of buyers agents that use this data, which is the most powerful data by far. Using history, you can paint a picture of the future to come, as history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And now we see the regions in New South Wales hitting their limits and softening, and the ripple effect will come back to the major capitals such as Sydney and Melbourne, and then they will then lead in the coming years ahead, while the regions will be going through another stagnant growth period. So buyers beware. Hope that that helps. I might have to do a series of the blue chip bandits, as the next one can be unpacking, buying a supposed blue chip Bondi Beach, Vaucluse, Tamarama, 1 or 2 bedroom unit for the same money. If you got plenty of bucks to spend, buy blocks of units. If we went to Harry Triggerboff, the biggest investor in the game, and said, "Hey, Harry, would you buy a cottage and build a smaller cottage out the back and spend 1.6 million bucks in a regional town, or would you go buy a block of 8 or 10? Guarantee he would say blocks of units. Blocks of units is where you want to land. We can help you get there. It is by far the best asset that has built many fortunes, such as Harry Triggerboff and Donald Trump, the Trump organization. If you want help getting there, hit us up today. Happy to chat any day of the week, but buyers beware. Don't get conned into buying a supposed blue chip property and get robbed by the blue chip bandits. Until next time, I'll put my comments below, details below. Hit me up if you want help buying an investment grade property and building a sustainable property portfolio that is self-sufficient. You only need 50 grand cash up front to start, and you don't need to earn more than 100 grand, 120, 50 grand income. Obviously, it will help, but we build the portfolio so they are self-sufficient and they can continue to grow while you sleep and are not dependent on you earning a large income. Until next time, thanks for watching. Happy New Year. Hit the off button.